Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into the original transcripts from a really tense Cold War showdown. We're going to look at what happened when a powerful congressional committee went hunting for communists and ran smack into American labor unions right in the heart of the country.
So picture this. The year is 1959. We're in Chicago. The Cold War isn't some distant thing happening on the other side of the world. It's a real fear, something you can feel, and it's seeping into every part of American life, from the halls of government right down to the factory floors. A major battle is about to go down, and it's going to put some core American ideals to the test.
All right, let's meet our main players. First up, you've got the House Committee on Un-American Activities, better known as HUAC. And let me tell you, this was a formidable group. They've just rolled into Chicago, and they are not there for a city tour. No, they are on a mission. And that mission is to find and expose what they believe is a deep-seated communist influence inside the city's powerful labor unions. To understand HUAC's mindset, you just have to listen to their staff director, Richard Ahrens. For them, this wasn't just some investigation. The stakes were, epic. They saw themselves as the last line of defense for Western civilization itself, fighting a global conspiracy hell-bent on destroying everything they believed in. But then, from the witness stand, a completely different story starts to unfold. One of the men being investigated, Richard Crenley, gets up there and he doesn't see a noble defense of freedom. He sees a witch hunt. And he draws this direct, absolutely chilling line from what's happening in that room right then in 1959 all the way back to the Salem witch trials. The battle lines were drawn. So what exactly was this committee, HUAC? Well, it was an official committee of the U.S. Congress, and it had this incredibly broad and powerful mandate to investigate pretty much anyone or anything it considered disloyal or subversive. They could subpoena private citizens, haul them in for questioning. Their reach was huge, and their influence was, frankly, terrifying to a lot of people. Okay, so let's dig into the committee's actual case here. How were they going to prove this conspiracy? Their entire argument in Chicago was built on the really startling testimony of several former communists who were now working as government informants. And this is where it gets explosive. A witness named John Hackney gets up and lays out the core of their claim. He testifies that the Communist Party's interest in the meatpacking unions had nothing to do with better wages or working conditions. No, he said, it was a strategic plot to control the nation's food supply, to be able to shut it down in case of a war. Then came the committee's star witness, Carl Nelson. He delivered what was basically a bombshell in just 2 words. When the committee counsel asked him to describe the extent of communist infiltration in the Chicago meatpacking industry, his answer was stark, simple, and absolutely devastating. Saturated it. Just like that, he paints this picture of a vital American industry being completely overrun. The informants then broke down exactly how this was supposedly done. They described these secret tactics, claiming that communists would technically resign from the party to get around laws like the Taft-Hartley Act, but they'd secretly stay loyal. From there, they'd work their way up into powerful positions in the unions and operate through other groups, these front organizations like the National Negro Labor Council, to push their agenda without anyone knowing. Okay, so that's the committee's case. It sounds pretty damning, right? But the union at the center of all this, the United Packhousing Workers of America, they weren't just going to sit there and take it. They fired back with their own formal statement, offering a totally different view of reality. The union's argument was basically this. You're dragging up a dead past. You're punishing us for things that happened years, even decades ago. They said, look, we're a democratic union. We fight for our workers. And if some of our members once had radical ideas, the fact that they're now working within our democratic union proves our system works. They said these hearings were nothing but a public pillory, just a stage to publicly humiliate and destroy them. And this brings us to the witnesses who refused to play ball, the so-called unfriendly witnesses. These were the union officials and organizers who got hit with subpoenas. They knew they couldn't just stop the hearings, but they came armed with a very, very powerful legal shield. At the very heart of their defense was the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And you probably know this one. It's the part that says no person can be forced to be a witness against themselves. It's the right to remain silent, to not incriminate yourself. And they were about to use it over and over again. So what you got was this incredible standoff, right there in the hearing room. It became this predictable, almost theatrical loop. The committee's lawyer would ask the big question, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And one after another, the witnesses would give the exact same response. I refuse to answer on the grounds of the Fifth Amendment. It was a total deadlock. Congressional power versus constitutional rights. But they weren't just being defensive. Oh, no. They went on the attack. In this incredible moment of defiance, Richard Krigley, the same guy who mentioned the Salem witch trials, actually turned the committee's own language against them. He quoted former President Harry Truman to argue that HUAC itself was the most un-American thing in the whole country, and that maybe it should be investigating itself. And their legal fight went way beyond just pleading the Fifth. Their lawyers threw the whole constitutional book at the committee. They argued that the committee's entire reason for being, to investigate un-American activities, was so vague it was unconstitutional. They claimed Hawk was acting like a court, punishing people, not making laws, and they said the whole thing was a massive violation of their First Amendment rights to free speech and to associate with whomever they wanted. So you see, at the end of the day, these hearings became something much bigger than just an investigation into a union. They turned into a public battleground for a really fundamental debate about American values. It was a clash between two deeply held and, as it turns out, pretty much irreconcilable ideas about what it means to be an American. You can really boil the entire conflict down to this. On one side, you have the committee. They believe their duty to protect national security gave them the right, even the obligation, to expose people's private political beliefs in public. But on the other side, you had the witnesses, and they were arguing that their constitutional rights to privacy, to free association, to not testify against themselves were absolute and couldn't be taken away by anyone. So who won? Well, that's the thing. Nobody did. Not really. The hearings just ended. It was a stalemate. The committee got its headlines, but it couldn't break the witnesses. The union leaders stayed out of jail, but many of them paid a huge price in their careers and reputations. The Chicago hearings didn't solve anything. They just put this core American conflict on full display for everyone to see. And so that question that was hanging in the air back in that Chicago hearing room in 1959, it's still with us. It's a question we are still wrestling with today, all the time. In a society that values freedom, how do we find that delicate balance between keeping the country safe and protecting the rights of the individual? Where do we draw that line?